a young boy who happened to be of African American descent, lost his job for assisting a woman with disabilities. A week later, he received a surprising revelation. In a different story, there was once a family of 3 who enjoyed a relatively happy and stable life. Sarah, a dedicated schoolteacher, was married to Ben, a successful businessman. Their family included their 17-year-old daughter, Emily. One fateful day, tragedy struck as Ben was caught in a blizzard on his way home from work, resulting in a fatal car accident. His sudden demise left the 2 women in the family in a state of shock. Ben had been the pillar of their small family, working tirelessly to provide for his wife and daughter. However, his untimely death plunged them into financial hardship, turning their once ordinary life completely upside down. Sarah, the mother, did her utmost to make ends meet. She took on various odd jobs and worked long hours to ensure they had enough food on the table and a roof over their heads. Unfortunately, despite her tireless efforts, the bills continued to pile up, making it a struggle to cover the rent each month. The financial strain began to take a toll on the relationship between Sarah and her daughter, Emily. Emily, now 17, started to blame her mother for their difficulties, believing that she could have done more to prevent their current predicament. Sarah attempted to explain that she was doing everything within her power, but Emily refused to listen. As time passed, Emily grew more distant from her mother, spending less time at home and more with her friends. Determined to create a new life for herself, Emily applied to colleges across the country, seeking to escape the poverty that had gripped their lives. Sarah continued to support her daughter and care for her, but Emily never displayed any remorse or affection. She persisted in blaming her mother for their problems, failing to realize that they were facing these challenges together. The constant bickering and blaming eventually took a toll on Sarah's health. She became very ill, rendering her unable to work and provide for her family. Emily was compelled to take on more responsibilities, albeit begrudgingly, while still resenting her mother. When Emily was accepted into a college far away, she viewed it as her opportunity to leave her home life behind and start anew. Without looking back, she moved across the country to pursue her dreams, determined to build a better life for herself. Emily wanted to be free from the emotional burden of her past. Over the years, she built a successful career, rarely speaking to her mother due to her busy life. As Emily pursued her dreams, Sarah was left alone, struggling to make ends meet without her daughter's assistance. Despite her illness and the pain it caused her, Sarah's love for Emily never wavered. She longed for a chance to reconcile with her daughter and would have done anything to see her one last time. Realizing that her time was running out, Sarah's final wish was to hold her daughter's hand and express her love. The nurse who was caring for Sarah reached out to Emily, pleading for her to visit her mother. She stressed the gravity of Sarah's condition and how meaningful it would be for her mother to have Emily by her side during her final moments. However, Emily declined, citing her busy schedule and her new circle of friends, failing to recognize the urgency of her mother's plea. She thought it was just another complaint from her mother. As the nurse conveyed Emily's refusal to Sarah, the weight of her regret and sorrow became unbearable. Sarah's breaths became rapid and shallow, and her thoughts spiraled into grief. She clutched her chest, feeling her heart pounding against her hand, realizing that her time was slipping away. The nurse watched in disbelief as Sarah took her last breath, her hand still grasping her heart in a final gesture of love and longing. In truth, Emily hadn't comprehended the severity of her mother's condition until it was too late. She had taken her mother's love and care for granted. Assuming that her mother would always be there, the nurses called informing her of her mother's passing overwhelmed Emily with regret and sorrow. She recognized that she had been too absorbed in her own life to appreciate the sacrifices her mother had made for her. After losing her mother, Emily eventually moved on with her life and found happiness with her husband, whom she had met in college. They started a family, and Emily gave birth to a beautiful daughter named Sophia. It wasn't until she became a mother herself that she realized the immense responsibility her own mother had shouldered. She gained a newfound respect for mothers and realized the sacrifices her mother had made. Emily tried her best to be an excellent mother to Sophia. But as Sophia grew, she exhibited the same selfishness and unkindness Emily had displayed. In her younger years, Sophia rejected her mother's efforts, and Emily wondered if she was facing consequences for her past mistakes. As Emily grew older, her husband's frequent work-related absences left her feeling lonely and unsupported. Her daughter remained distant and uninvolved, despite Emily's attempts to build a relationship. During one of her husband's extended work trips to Japan, Emily fell seriously ill. Sophia refused to care for her and instead placed her in a subpar elderly home. Emily felt uncomfortable and unfamiliar in her new surroundings, displaying signs of dementia and becoming increasingly dependent on the caregivers. Emily longed for the love and support she had never received from her daughter. Her husband's absence compounded her isolation and loneliness as her health deteriorated. Her visits to the cafeteria at the elderly home caught the attention of a young man named Marcus, who worked there. He could see the loneliness in Emily's eyes and decided to offer her some companionship during her visits. Marcus would often join Emily during her meals, listening to her stories and empathizing with her situation. As he got to know Emily better, he learned of her dreams to live in a place filled with love and companionship. Marcus was determined to help her turn this dream into reality. Over time, Marcus devised a plan to rescue Emily from the lonely and unwelcoming environment of the elderly home. He reached out to his community and enlisted the support of a local church group known for their generosity and kindness. Together, they worked to find a new home for Emily, a place where she could finally experience the love and care she deserved. When the opportunity arose, Marcus and the church group wasted no time in relocating Emily to her new, loving home, fulfilling her long-held dream. In this warm and inviting environment, Emily found herself surrounded by love and companionship, finally experiencing a sense of belonging. She was deeply grateful for the kindness of the people who had facilitated her move to this new home. However, Marcus's selfless act of kindness did not go unnoticed by the elderly home. They discovered that Emily had left with Marcus and, as a result, he was dismissed from his job. Emily's testimony was essential, as it confirmed that she had willingly chosen to accompany Marcus. Otherwise, he might have faced legal repercussions for alleged kidnapping. Despite these risks, Marcus was content with the knowledge that he had made a significant, positive impact on Emily's life. Marcus had gone above and beyond to assist Emily, and she remained forever grateful for his kindness and compassion. She had never encountered someone like him before and recognized the goodness within him. Their friendship, which had an unconventional beginning, had grown into something beautiful that both cherished. Emily finally found peace of mind and reconnected with her husband, who returned home and offered a heartfelt apology for not being there when she needed him. Upon learning about her ordeal, Emily's daughter also realized her past mistakes and visited her mother to apologize and make amends. As for Marcus, He received a surprising turn of events a week later when he received a heartfelt thank you letter and a check for $10,000 from Emily's family as a token of their deep appreciation for his unwavering support. While Marcus had never sought anything in return for his actions, this unexpected gift allowed him to fulfill his dream of opening his own restaurant. Emily was delighted to have her daughter back in her life and came to understand that sometimes it takes a crisis to bring people together. She also realized that the love and support of family and friends can make all the difference in the world, especially during challenging times. After watching Marcus and Emily's moving story, how do you feel? Next, there is another horrifying story. Let's see what will happen. Detective Jason Mercer found himself in a dangerous predicament while in pursuit of a group of criminals. He had recently crossed paths with them on patrol and was now chasing them through the city streets. The crooks left fresh footprints in their wake, leading Jason through a complex network of dimly lit streets. He was convinced that they were responsible for a series of violent crimes that had been plaguing the city. Jason hadn't expected to encounter them in this part of town. He had been patrolling a safer area, but he acted on impulse, without waiting for backup. As he rounded a dimly lit corner, his breath hung in the frigid air, and his footsteps echoed in the darkness. He knew he was getting closer to the criminals, and his heart raced with anticipation. Regret flashed through his mind briefly. He should have called for backup. But it was too late now. The chase had taken him into a dark alley, blocked at one end by a towering brick wall and flanked by two empty streets leading in different directions. There was no sign of the criminals, they seemed to have disappeared. Frustration washed over Jason. He scanned the area desperately, searching for any hint of their presence. He knew that letting them escape now would be detrimental to his career. With a gloved hand resting on his holstered weapon, he stayed ready for any sudden movement. Suddenly, the stillness of the night was shattered by the sounds of running. Jason knew he was closing in on the criminals, and he gave chase. The chase continued further into the alley, and Jason could feel the criminals were close. His eyes scanned the area, and that's when he saw an unassuming hearse parked amidst the gloom. It stood out with its tinted windows and glossy exterior, unlike the surrounding grime. Then, out of nowhere, the hearse's engine roared to life, its tires screeching as it sped away. Jason sprinted after it, shouting for the vehicle to stop. The hearse accelerated down the alley, disappearing around a corner. Jason hurriedly radioed for backup, explaining the situation and providing the hearse's last known direction. He couldn't afford to wait. He dashed back to his own car, got in, and started to pursue the hearse. He was relieved to spot the hearse's headlights in the distance. He tailed the hearse closely until it finally pulled over near an old, run-down church. Jason parked his car and approached cautiously, weapon drawn. The driver's side door of the hearse opened, revealing an elderly man with silver hair and a calm demeanor. He didn't seem to match the description of any of the criminals Jason had been chasing. "Evening, officer." The elderly man greeted politely. "Is there a problem?" Jason, taken aback, asked. "Were you aware that you just fled from a crime scene?" The old man appeared genuinely puzzled. "Crime scene? You must be mistaken, officer. I received a call for a funeral pickup. That's why I rushed here. But a crime scene? No idea." Jason scrutinized the rear section of the hearse, half expecting to find the criminals. Instead, he saw a neatly arranged coffin, ready for a funeral service, with no sign of his targets. He hesitated for a moment, uncertain if the hearse was an active or unwitting accomplice to the criminals. Just as he was about to make a decision, chaos erupted. Jason was suddenly overwhelmed and attacked from behind. He was forcefully shoved into the hearse's rear compartment. And the lid slammed shut above him, sealing him in darkness. Jason found himself trapped inside the hearse. And it began to move, carrying him to an unknown destination. He could hear the muffled voices of his assailants outside, talking and laughing. It was clear to him that this was not a random event but a well-planned ambush. The criminals he had been pursuing had used the hearse, both as a distraction and a means to incapacitate him. As the vehicle sped away from the scene, Jason's heart raced with adrenaline. He strained to make sense of the situation. Memories from years ago resurfaced in his mind. Memories that had shaped his life. His parents had been brutally taken from him in a gruesome act of retribution by the leader of a powerful gang. They had offered to defend a member of a rival gang who had turned on the organization in court. Since their tragic deaths, Jason had dedicated his life to bringing those responsible to justice. He joined law enforcement with the hope of uncovering the truth. But the criminal organization remained elusive. Their identities were unknown. His unwavering dedication to finding his parents' killers had come at a steep cost. He had been demoted to a patrol officer due to his relentless obsession with the case. The higher-ups had grown frustrated with his single-minded pursuit. Despite this, Jason couldn't let go, continuing to investigate covertly. As the hearse continued to speed through the city, Jason knew he had to escape. He quietly examined the surroundings, searching for any way out. The rear compartment was spacious enough to accommodate the coffin and more. Desperation fueled his determination. With a well-placed kick, he managed to dislodge one of the panels on the floor, revealing a hidden storage compartment containing various tools and equipment. Among these tools, he found a crowbar, which he knew could be his ticket to freedom. He held onto it tightly, ready for an opportunity to use it. When the hearse eventually came to a stop, Jason's heart raced. He could hear the voices of his captors, engaged in a muffled conversation, and it seemed they believed he was still inside the rear compartment. No one came to open the boot. So, Jason decided to make his move and escape. He positioned himself near the rear doors, ready to seize an opportunity when it presented itself. Checking his pockets, he discovered that his phone was still with him. But there was no cellular service in the vicinity, so he couldn't call for backup. Gently cracking the boot open just a sliver, his eyes widened in shock at the scene before him. The hearse had brought him to a clandestine location teeming with illegal activities, drug deals, smuggling, and other nefarious deeds taking place under the cover of night. With trepidation, Jason realized that he had stumbled upon the heart of a criminal syndicate's operations. He was at the gang's hideout. And a closer look revealed that it was no other gang but the Red Strikers. The same gang that had ordered the deaths of his parents. For Jason, the night had taken an unexpected turn. He hadn't imagined that he would inadvertently find the very organization he had been hunting. The place he was in was no accident. It was the Red Strikers' hideout. Suddenly, the play in the criminal activities came to a halt. And Jason saw that everyone was waiting for someone or something. The silence of the night was broken by the distant hum of an approaching vehicle. Jason's heart raced even faster as he realized that the situation was about to take a new and dangerous turn. Jason, realizing he had a slim chance of escaping this nightmarish scenario, watched as a car pulled in, and several armed men disembarked from it. In the dim light, he could make out that the gang had a considerable number of armed members accompanying someone in the center. Jason suspected that this individual was likely the leader of the gang. As the criminals scurried around to welcome the high-ranking figure who had just arrived, Jason seized the opportunity to escape. He quietly slipped out of the hearse, his heart pounding, and concealed himself in the shadows. He observed as the gang's leader addressed his underlings and conducted their illicit operations. During this time, one of the gang members approached the hearse and raised an alarm. When he discovered that Jason was missing from the rear compartment, panic spread through the group as they frantically looked for the escaped police officer. In the midst of the chaos, Jason recognized that he had to get away. With a cautious glance around, he returned to the unguarded hearse and climbed into the driver's seat. He started the engine and pulled away from the scene. Despite his escape, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone in the vehicle. Faint sounds emanated from the rear compartment of the hearse, alerting him to the fact that there was another occupant. Jason drove far away from the scene of the crime before deciding to pull over and investigate further. With caution, he parked the hearse in a secluded area. He knew he needed to deal with whatever or whoever was in the back. His heart still pounding, he stepped out of the vehicle and circled around to the rear. When he opened the rear door, he was met with a shocking and heart-wrenching sight. The sounds were coming from inside the coffin he had been shoved beside. In all the chaos, he had forgotten there was a coffin in the hearse with him. What he saw inside was horrifying. Within the coffin lay a young woman, barely conscious, her fragile skin marred by bruises. The remnants of a gag hinted at the horror she had endured. Her hands and feet were bound with tape, and she looked up at Jason with wide-eyed terror. Without hesitation, Jason gently lifted the young woman from the coffin and cradled her in his arms. Time was of the essence, and he knew her life was in jeopardy. He rushed back to the driver's seat of the hearse and sped toward the nearest hospital. Upon arriving at the emergency entrance, Jason carried the woman inside, where a team of medical professionals swiftly took charge. They assessed her condition and worked tirelessly to stabilize her. Jason watched with a mixture of relief and concern as they tended to her injuries. With the young woman now in capable hands, Jason found himself in need of medical attention as well. He had been through a harrowing ordeal, physically and emotionally drained. As he was examined by the hospital staff, he couldn't help but reflect on the tangible web of mysteries and danger that had brought him to this point. The minutes turned into an hour as Jason recuperated and provided statements to his fellow officers about the night's events and the location of the gang's hideout. The woman, once near death's door, began to show signs of recovery, bringing great joy to Jason. He knew that the criminal syndicate responsible for the woman's ordeal needed to be brought to justice. He also understood that she was now a key witness, and her safety was paramount. Laura, the young woman he had rescued, explained that the gang members had abducted her from her home in the early hours of that evening. She was the daughter of a renowned judge, and the gang's motive had been to use her as a bargaining chip to influence the judge's ruling in their favor in a court case. However, they had used too much chloroform to subdue her, mistakenly believing she had died when she wouldn't wake up. This had led them to stash her into the coffin, thinking she was lifeless. Detective Jason Mercer, despite his initial intention to resign from the police department, chose to embark on a different path. He had accumulated a wealth of knowledge and experience in his relentless pursuit of justice. With this expertise, he decided to establish a consultancy business, enabling him to guide and assist others through the intricate world of criminal justice. This new phase of his life not only allowed him to continue helping people but also provided a fresh perspective and a sense of purpose. As he ventured into this new career, Jason unexpectedly found solace and happiness in his life. Laura, the young woman he had rescued from the clutches of the criminal syndicate, had become an integral part of his life. Their shared harrowing experience had deepened their bond, and their friendship had evolved into something more meaningful. Together, they found comfort, understanding and support in each other's company. The challenges they faced were no longer solitary burdens. Jason realized that he no longer had to carry the weight of his past alone. Laura had brought warmth and light into his life, and he cherished the deep connection they had forged. Looking back on the tumultuous path that had led him to this point, Jason acknowledged that the scars of his past would always be a part of him. However, he could now move forward with a newfound sense of purpose, leaving behind the shadows of his history and embracing the light of a new beginning.